In the 1970s, a strange visitor walked across a remote pass in the far north of India. Young Englishwoman Diane Perry ventured into the snow-laden peaks of the Himalayan mountains. What was it she was looking for?
I believed from a very early age that we were inherently perfect and that we had to come back again and again to realize and attain to our innate perfection. So therefore, my two big questions were, what is perfection? And how do we attain it? And I asked many people, teachers and priests and everybody who I thought might know. They all say, you have to be good, or you have to be good, you have to be kind. And I felt, well, yeah, of course you have to be good and kind, but that's not it. Because, I mean, many people I know are good and kind, but they're not perfect. Perfection is beyond that. That's just the foundation.
Diane Perry's search for perfection led her to Tibetan Buddhism. Taking on the name of Tenzin Palmo, she isolated herself in a cave 14,000 feet above sea level. Here, with only the company of wolves and snow leopards, she embarked on a 12-year period of intensive Buddhist meditation. For 8 months of the year during the harsh winters, the cave was entirely cut off from the rest of the world.
The whole point of being in these long retreats is that it gives time to really merge with the practice. And also it has to do with this whole idea of identity of the roles which we normally play. I mean, if one is relating with others, then one is relating within a role, even if it's male or female or, you know, one's profession, mother, daughter, husband, wife, doctors, lawyers, laborers, whatever. We all have certain roles which we're playing for others and to a certain extent to ourselves. And when one is in solitude, especially when one is looking inside, then it gives a chance for all these various identifications to be peeled away. Because why bother to play roles to oneself? And it gives a chance, the space, for more deep layers of the consciousness to start arising and be identified.
Tenzin Palmo is now one of the most learned and influential Tibetan Buddhist nuns in the world. It has been a long and difficult journey for the girl from Bethnal Green.
I was born in 1943 during the Second World War in Hertfordshire, but brought up in Bethnal Green in East London. And my father was a fishmonger, and I have an older brother who was 6 years older than myself. My father died when I was 2 years old, and so then my mother took over the fish shop and struggled to bring up my brother and myself. I think I was really quite a typical sort of English girl. I always felt it was a pity. I mean, in a way, being a kind of Church of England, Anglo-Saxon in the middle of London in those days was the same as being sort of nothing. And I envied my Jewish friends who had a strong sense of identity and cultural identity, which I think, you know, the average person, at least brought up in London, didn't have. I didn't feel a very deep connection with Jesus. I didn't believe Jesus could save us. Save us from what? Only we can save ourselves. God is inside. It's not something out sitting in the sky pulling the strings. And you have to rediscover your own inner, you know, spark of the divine. So during my adolescence, I was looking into many religions, trying to find a very clear definition and path for regaining our true nature. When I was 18, I read a book on Buddhism and immediately recognized that this is what I had always believed, although I hadn't realized that there actually was a religion which put it so nicely and so clearly, I mean, far better than I had ever formulated it for myself. And then gradually I became interested in Tibetan Buddhism, and so when I was 20, I left for India in order to find a teacher.
When Tenzin Palmo arrived in India, she was one of many Westerners looking for enlightenment in the East. She went to stay with another Englishwoman, Frida Bedi, at a school for young lamas in Dalhousie, northern India. The school was awaiting the arrival of an important lama, the 8th Kamtrul Rinpoche, who Tenzin Palmo hoped would take her on as a student.
On the last day of June, which was my 21st birthday, the phone rang and Frida Bedi answered it, and then she said to me, well, your best birthday present has just arrived down at the bus station. Come to Rinpoche is here. So then I was just, I was completely in a panic, thinking, oh, my lama's come. I had never seen him. I didn't know if he was old or young or fat or thin or anything. I had never seen a photo of him. So then I went in and I prostrated and I offered the scarf, and then I just sat there, and I was so nervous that I couldn't even look at him. And so I just sat and I stared down at the end of his robe and his brown shoes. Then I looked up and saw him for the first time. And then it was first of all as if I was seeing somebody that I knew very well that I hadn't seen for a long time, like, oh, how lovely to see you again. And at the same time, it was as if the very deepest part of my being had suddenly taken material form in front of me, that, like he had always been inside me, but now he was manifested outside. And 3 weeks later, I received my first nun's ordination from him, which was probably not only the greatest birthday present I could have had, but the greatest blessing of my life. Rinpoche said to me that in previous lives I was able to keep you very close to me, but this time you have taken female form, so it's more difficult. I stayed with him and his community for about 6 years. I was working as his secretary and also teaching English to the young monks. But because those were very early days, they really didn't know what to teach to a Western person. And also being female and the only nun, I didn't belong anywhere. I didn't belong in the lay community. I also didn't belong in the monastery. So although it was wonderful being near to Rinpoche and the other lamas, it was also a time of great loneliness. People ask if I was lonely in the cave, but I wasn't lonely in the cave. I was very lonely when I lived in the community. And also very frustrated because I couldn't really get any solid teachings. It was impossible to fight the prejudice within a monastery. There was no way. Not only because of being Western, but because of being female. I mean, I saw it when male Westerners came, how they were treated and how much teachings they were given, even if they weren't even Buddhists. what to speak of monks, if they were just scholars or just anybody that turned up. I mean, the lamas automatically, without even questioning it, gave them all sorts of teaching and so much time and so much attention just because they were males.
Eventually, after several years at the monastery, Tenzin Palmo got enough teachings to feel confident she could go into extended retreat. On the advice of her Lama, Kamtrul Rinpoche, she began to look for a suitable place.
Eventually I heard that there was this sort of cave up on the mountain about an hour or so away from Tayugompa. So one day a group of us, of monks and nuns, we went up the mountain to have a look. And so then when I saw it, I thought that this would be a very ideal place to stay. So we built it up and made a proper wall and put in doors and windows and then mudded it over on the outside and the inside. And then I moved in.
This is the very cave where Tenzin Palmo lived for 12 years alone in the retreat. Yeah, here she put a small box, that is meditation box, that is Tibetans call the gomti. In the gomti, you can just sit as in a meditation posture, but you cannot lie down. That she did for 12 years, like Buddha did for 6 years, but she lived for 12 years here in this high mountain cave.
So this is the meditation box, and then this was a box which I used as the table, and then these are Tibetan books wrapped in cloth. And this is the window, and this is the stovepipe. And when one was in retreat, then normally the day was divided into 4 sessions, so one got up around 3 and did the first session until 6, and then had breakfast, and then started again around 8 until 11, and then had lunch, and then had a break. I mean, there was always things to do, especially in the winter, a lot of clearing snow and chopping wood and other tasks, and then to start again at 3 for another 3 hours, and then have a tea break, and then again in the evening.
There she used to grow some vegetables during summer. And this small area, she grows here turnip, cabbages. That small fence was there to keep the wild animals away. And this is the way where she used to go for fetching water.
Every year I also would come back to Tashijan to see Kamtrul Rinpoche to check up with him. When I was away, then I would, if any ideas came to me, I would write questions, all sorts of different kinds of questions, and I would have these pages of questions. And then when I would see him again, he'd sort of lean back and say, okay, where's your list? And I would ask him all these questions, and his answers were always so perfect, because he would say, well, according to this tradition they say this, according to that tradition they say that, in this book it says this or that, and on this level it's like this, on this it's like that, but I think, but this is just my opinion, I think, and it was always exactly right, he was just really, he was a Buddha.
Tenzin Palmo's annual visits to her teacher guided her rigorous practice. She studied classical Tibetan texts, which described complex visualization techniques. In accordance with the highest aesthetic traditions, she slept for only 3 hours every night, seated in a meditation posture. Temperatures dropped to below minus 30 degrees. Snow made the cave damp and dangerous.
How many months a year did you have snow?
Depended on the year, anything from 6 to 8 months.
To 8 months?
Yeah,
Well,
sometimes it would start snowing in November and just carry on until May. And one time there was a blizzard for a week, and everything got completely submerged by snow. And so when you opened the door, which fortunately opened inwards, there was just this like wall of ice. It was completely black. It was blacker than you can, I mean, there just was no light. And I was afraid that the lamp would be eating up oxygen, because I thought, well, you know, we're completely blocked on all sides, everywhere, and that there's only going to be a little oxygen, and that you're going to use it up very quickly. So I thought, okay, so now I'm going to die. I mean, because then, you know, when I was getting all, you know, yes, you know, take care of me in the bardo and da-da-da-da-da, and then I heard this voice inside saying, dig out. I said, oh, yes, right, Rinpoche. Okay.
Right.
So,
I love it.
So then I tried digging out, because, you know, because it was a wall, then you had to bring the snow into the cave, right? So indeed it was not the cave in the snow, it was the snow in the cave.
Right.
And so at first I tried using a shovel, and then after a while the saucepan lid, and then as I was making this tunnel trying to go upwards, I just scrambled with my hands, and I had this very cold little dark, but anyway, eventually we hit light and got out. And then when I looked out, I stuck my head out, it was still blizzarding. And then I actually tunneled out 3 times before we got to the outside, and it wasn't blizzarding anymore.
What was the hardest thing you went through?
When the police officer came at the end and knocked on the door and said, handed me a notice saying you've been in the country for 3 years illegally, and you better come down because you've got 72 hours to get out the country.
Even hermits are subject to bureaucratic red tape, and Tenzin Palmo was forced to leave her beloved mountains. She decided to travel to Italy. It was some years before she returned to India. Having planned to spend her life in retreat, Tenzin Palmo now questioned what direction she should take. Her own early frustrations as a female practitioner were to influence her choice.
When I lived in Lahul, I saw so clearly how, even though many of the younger nuns were so intelligent and bright and devoted, they still had no opportunity for education, no opportunity for study, no opportunity for deeper practices. And this is so throughout all the border regions. While the monks are given opportunities for study and practice, this is denied to the nuns, who mostly end up just being household servants or servants for the monks. There are so many nuns wandering around who have no nunnery, and especially nuns coming from Tibet, because in Tibet the nuns are in the forefront of the freedom movement, and so they're especially disliked by the communists. And so many of them have tried to come into India. Some of them succeed, some of them don't. Many of them are caught at the various borders and then again gang raped and sent back, handed over back to the Chinese to be put in jail. Many nuns who are here have been imprisoned and interrogated and so forth, so they're very inwardly quite traumatized, but very brave.
Nuns who have managed to escape Tibet join the ranks of many other nuns in the border regions who have struggled to access teachings. The lack of opportunities for women led Tenzin Palmo to consider the possibility of starting a nunnery.
We went to see an astrologer, and so then I said to him, look, I have these two options. Either I can go into retreat or I can start a nunnery. So which should I do? And he looked in the chart, and then he said, well, if you go into retreat, very harmonious, very peaceful, very nice. If you start a nunnery, many problems, many conflicts, many difficulties. But both are good, so you decide. So then I thought, well, obviously, back into retreat. Yeah. And then I met with a Catholic priest, and I mentioned this to him. And so he said, oh, well, of course you start in a nunnery. He said, what's the use of always being in a peaceful, pleasant situation? We are like rough pieces of wood. And if we're always stroking ourselves with silk and velvet, that's very nice, but it doesn't make us smooth. To become smooth, what we need is sandpaper. So the nunnery is my sandpaper.
Having made her decision, Tenzin Palmo embarked on a grueling international schedule of public talks and lectures in order to raise funds for the nunnery project. A group of sympathetic volunteers stepped in to help with the logistics.
All proceeds goes to DGL nunneries. It's for the development of the nuns.
We think having big houses and fancy cars and lots of money is security, but that's totally insecure, especially in our present economy. We think having family and relationships and children is security, but that's not security because people leave, people die. If all our ideas of happiness and security are on the outside, then we are like walking on ice.
Tenzin Palmo's talks and the story of her remarkable journey to become a Buddhist nun caught the imagination of people all over the world. She became a Buddhist icon and an international celebrity.
Inspiration with your courage. I come seeking wisdom generally and for specific things, and it comes through. I get always a gem or two to take home. I saw her 2 years ago in Sydney, and there's always a gem or two to take home and really transform my life with.
And we are noticing that the nuns really are really dedicated and practicing, and we hope that in the future some of them, through their studies and through their practices, can also become teachers of others, because there is a great dearth of female teachers in the Tibetan tradition. So thank you very much.
Taiwan is a very unique situation. There is about 3 times the amount of nuns than monks. So you would definitely find that there will be more nuns in service in this conference than monks would be. So right over here, we will stress equality between the monks and nuns in regards of activity and work status. So you can notice that most of our helpers are all nuns, or all women.
But most of the delegates are men.
他是说大部分的参加语者是男众。这样子。对。
This is basically a boys' club with the young girls doing all the work. I mean, the young Chinese girls who are working their guts out for everybody, but the big guys are all guys. I wasn't even scheduled to speak. And it's only because they had extra time left over and they probably thought, oh, well, let's stick her in. But, I mean, you know, by rights, my input would have been absolutely nil.
In Buddhist tradition, we are told that it's impossible for a female or a woman to attain Buddhahood. Yeah, we have to transform into a male body to become a Buddha. Yeah, it's strongly emphasized.
The Buddha himself was very open-minded, but gradually the Sangha, the community, became more misogynic. So the traditional meditation was to look for a monk or a nun, to go and meditate on the body from the top of the head to the soles of the feet, as if you're taking the skin off and you're looking inside at what were traditionally called the 32 parts of the body. You know, the brains, the lungs, the heart, the spleen, the intestines, just seeing it as it is, so as to create this sense of disenchantment towards the body. Some centuries later, the texts by, for example, Nagarjuna or Shantideva, who were great Indian pundits, talk about seeing a female in front of you, and you're peeling the skin away from her and looking at all her bodily parts, or imagining her as a corpse and decomposing and all the worms coming out, etc. Her body is filthy and foul and disgusting. She is an object of contempt. It's no longer the monk. The monk's fine and pure. It's her. And so this attitude, which is in some of the main texts which all Tibetans study, is very there.
보면서는 전부 쉬우셔서나 근데 기능 건강을 미게 빠르지는 거 자체는 저기 있어야 돼. 망발. 보면 전에 지라 어쩌서나 진짜 되시고 있어야 돼.
We can change. The Buddha himself said that we can change. If we could not change, I would not tell you to change. But we can change. We can turn our anger and our sense of aversion and revenge into understanding and loving kindness and compassion. We can do that.
Just now you cuddle me, I feel so warm. Just now I cannot cry, but now I'm so touching that your love to me. I don't know nobody love me in this world, but you do. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I hope see you next time. Let's go. Let's go.
I don't like giving talks. Otherwise it would be fun. There's always this little voice inside me saying, what do you think you're doing? And I think, yeah, what? There are times when I really feel trapped by the process, so to speak. You know, ending up starting this nunnery and going on world tours and things like that. And there are times when I feel a bit like a rabbit in a cage.
The years of touring have borne fruit. Tenzin Palmo and her team of volunteers have finally raised enough money to purchase land on which the nunnery will be built. Makeshift accommodation is being used to house the first of many applicants. 24 young girls have already arrived and been ordained. Plans are being made for a nunnery which will eventually house 160.
She is by temperament a hermit. I mean, not in the sense of being against the world, but the way in which she enters the world the most completely is entering it in grace and as a spiritual support, which is tremendous spiritual support to all of her friends and the people who know her. Now, in her expending her time and her energy on an exterior project, one worries about her. It's as though she's spending on a small specific everything that's great in her. And I see it as a tremendous sacrifice of her. Every moment that she doesn't spend in private meditation is a gift and a sacrifice.
One of Tenzin Palmo's ultimate objectives is to introduce ordination for nuns at the highest level. She herself received the full Bhikshuni ordination in Hong Kong in 1973. Such high ordination is only available in the Chinese Buddhist tradition. Echoing the experience of women from many faiths, there is continued opposition within Buddhist institutions to the high ordination of women. Tenzin Palmo's determination to change the status quo in the Tibetan system has led her to His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, the spiritual leader of the Tibetan government in exile.
Chala. Allah. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Fine.
Really?
I'm fully recovered now.
Oh,
No problem.
may you live to be at least 108, if not 120.
Now, I feel it is very, very important to have one international Sangha sort of conference and discuss and according to the present circumstances. Of course, the Buddha himself is allowed, or you should give the ordination, the highest ordination for nun. Now, therefore, now we must make effort to reintroduce into those Buddhist community up to now no longer sort of Bhikshuni traditions. This is my task which is not yet accomplished.
Your Holiness, with all due respect, since I was ordained as a Bhikshuni in 73, we are now nearly in 2003. What progress have we made? We're still talking about it. You know, Your Holiness, getting anyone to agree to anything. There's always going to be objections, and it will never happen. We just have to do it.
I'm not Vansadhara. I'm not Buddha. If I'm Buddha, I'm Vansadhara, then I have the final authority to make new sort of traditions. But this is not the case.
I know.
We are just I always describe myself as a simple Buddhist monk,
right,
who are following the Buddhist teaching, and especially according to Nagarjuna's teaching. So
Nagarjuna was pretty down on women, I have to say.
Yes. And then Shantadeva also.
And honestly, Your Holiness, you are not a female. You cannot imagine how much one has had this projection onto oneself and other females. That one is impure, whereas we are immaculate monks, we are not impure.
That's true. That's true. That's true. Discourage. Many occasions, say I made very clear sort of the argument or suggestions, but even then sometimes it's difficult to change.
I know. Buddhists always talk about impermanence and change, but like everybody else, they don't like to change at all.
So I think the best thing, I think one of the positive, way to approach this problem or issue is, I think, like your work. I think this eventually, I think, the real effect will come.
It will come. It will come, Your Holiness. It will come.
So very good.
Just so you remember who we all are. And we hope once our nunnery is built, we're building it now, that you will please come and grace us.
Certainly.
It would be the most wonderful thing for us to happen. So here we go.
Henri. Lonnie. 계속 내려. 건축하네. 싸우자들. 랑. 가. 중부. 랑. 중부. 랑 그네. 건조. 쉬어. 어디 쉬어. 응. 쉬어. 랑. 가. 자나.
This will go on the front page of our newsletter. Big smile.
Thank you.
This here? Temple. This no? It's going to be office and office type stuff. So this here marked is here.
And you
here?
You are there. You're there.
This yeah. This is cow shed. And pump room here, and this little office just below, and then just beyond that is the study center. Going down the hill.
To teach her.
Yeah?
In Tibet, Kampa Rinpoche had a nunnery, and within this nunnery there were also groups of these females, the Tokden Ma. They were also very great practitioners by all accounts. However, as far as we know, after the Cultural Revolution, we haven't heard any more about any of them. So Kampa Rinpoche at one time placed a kata around my neck and said that he always prayed that I would restore the lineage of Tokden Ma. I have always felt that as a kind of inner sacred mission. So what we're trying to do is to get some of our nuns at least to the point where they could at least start to be trained in this particular lineage.
Tenzin Palmo's Lama always encouraged her to raise the standard of teaching offered to women and to reinstate the Togdenma lineage before the teachings were completely lost. The 8th Kamtrul Rinpoche died long before she was to embark on her arduous journey. The building of the nunnery honors a vision they shared.
One morning, I was with my Dharma sister, Annie Loder. We went along to the monastery, and meantime we met another older American monk, another Australian man, And they said, "We think you haven't heard." And we said, "What?" And they said, Kamta Rinpoche is dead. And I mean, I fainted, you know. I mean, it was the last thing in the world that any of us were expecting. He was only 48. Anyway, yeah, what can I say? I mean, I felt that I was in a big desert, and suddenly my guide had left, and I didn't know where to go. But then Annie Loader and I, after a while, we just sat and meditated together, and then I realized really the Lama's always in the heart. And the Lama isn't just the outer form. But I must say I do miss Rinpoche.
In the Buddhist tradition, death is not the end. High Lamas are reborn and recognized as incarnations. Tenzin Palmo's teacher is believed to have been reincarnated as the 9th Kamtrul Rinpoche. Now a young man, he has continued the support his predecessor offered Tenzin Palmo.
So Rinpoche, welcome once again.
As preparations are made to lay the foundations for the nunnery, the 9th Kamtrul Rinpoche is present to bless the land.
We're having a ceremony for consecrating the land for the first buildings which we're going to be putting up. We'll be doing a puja for the spirits of the earth to ask their cooperation and their blessings on this project. It's a very sad reflection that religion and the spiritual path, which should be something which opens us all up to our true human potential for wisdom and compassion, has often been the very vehicle which acts more to prejudice and to suppression. I personally do not want to create any big waves. That creates opposition. I think it's just very slowly, gradually, things begin to change. The very fact that now nuns actually study and nuns debate is already something which 10 years ago was unthinkable.
So things are moving.
Things are moving, you know, and the thing is to go carefully and slowly and gradually, but just keep going forward. Thank you, Rinpoche. Please always bless this nunnery. Well, no, you know, we're the hosts, so we have to run around and talk to people. Secondary. Oh.
We have your book, you know, we send it out to the prisoners.
She said that he said
inspire them. Yes, life in the cave, they will feel quite at home with this idea.
Say, don't feel bad, guys. This is where she lived.
And she chose it.
I suppose as the more I get to know her and spend time with her, and I see how she is with people, what she gives to people, how that people who come and listen to her teachings, who come and visit her here, how they go away, each of them goes away with something that they need from her. And I think she has these qualities of being able to help people, and that she can combine her 37 years as a Tibetan Buddhist nun, the most senior nun alive now. There's nobody who's been ordained earlier than her who's still alive. I think only 2 others were. that her life has really crossed a lot of boundaries, and it's covered a lot of history, if you like, about Buddhism in the West, which I think is also a really fascinating thing about her. That she saw it when the Tibetan Buddhists came out of Tibet, and she was there, and she's seen all the changes. She's lived it, she's had the teachings, and yet she can view all of this with a Western perspective. And she inspires many people, women and men, and women in particular, I think, who see that she's done it, and therefore, nobody else need be frightened of going for it as well.
Living in a cave is very different from living in a house. That's very much a shared experience. There's something very immovable about a cave, which is very stabilizing also for one's mind and practice.
How does this compare to your cave?
As with my cave, the rock roof is black from smoke and has mud walls, like my cave did. This one here is a little bit smaller because she has a separate kitchen, whereas in mine, the kitchen and the actual room were together. But in many ways, it's very similar.
How do you feel when you're sitting here again in a meditation box in a cave?
I think the best place in the world to be is sitting in a meditation box in a cave. I couldn't think of a nicer place to be. In a way, people are writing about and recording and relating to this being who doesn't really exist. Nobody believes me. But honestly, I just went to live in a cave because I wanted some peace and quiet and space. I just like being alone. For me, to be alone is blissful. People always think, oh, what did you get from being in a cave and all this? But I mean, I think all that is totally irrelevant. It's not like that. It's not like you're studying for a PhD and at the end you get your diploma, and all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions sort of stand there applauding and saying, well done, oh Bodhisattva named so-and-so. It's not that. I mean, every life, if it's used with any kind of consciousness, is a journey of discovery. And being in a cave was likewise a journey of discovery. It's not that you're arriving anywhere, but you're journeying. The journey itself is the important thing. The spiritual life is an ongoing process. You breathe in and you breathe out. Well, I breathed in by being in retreat, then I breathed out by trying to help to raise the standard for women, the potential for these girls that they can study and practice. And after that, then I need to breathe in again.